It all started on a bright afternoon in a small, close-knit neighborhood, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Life seemed simple for Meera, a young woman in her late 20s, but behind her cheerful smile was a restlessness she couldn't quite explain. She often wondered if life had more to offer than the routine she was living. Work, family gatherings, and endless advice from relatives who believed they knew the right path for her. But Meera was curious, ambitious, and if she admitted it to herself, a little reckless. Her aunts, uncles, and cousins often teased her about finding the perfect match, but Meera had never felt the spark she read about in novels or saw in movies. That is, until she met Arjun. Arjun was nothing like the ordinary men she had met at family functions or through friends. He had a charm that was hard to resist, a combination of confidence, warmth, and a quiet understanding that made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. There was a sense of familiarity, like she had known him somewhere before, though she couldn't put her finger on it. The twist, and the secret that would eventually turn her life upside down, was that Arjun wasn't a stranger to her family at all. He was her aunt's husband, a man she had admired from afar during countless family celebrations, always keeping a polite distance out of respect. Her aunt, Suman, was a woman of elegance and strength, the kind who commanded attention in every room she entered. Meera had always looked up to her, seeing her as a mentor and a guide. But the lines of admiration blurred the day Arjun smiled at her differently. That smile lingered, subtle but undeniable, planting a seed of curiosity and temptation that Meera couldn't ignore. At first it was harmless. A shared joke here, a casual chat there, nothing serious. But as weeks turned into months, Meera found herself thinking about Arjun more than she wanted to admit. She tried to push away the feelings, reminding herself that crossing this boundary would destroy everything she had ever valued about family trust. But emotions have a way of ignoring reason, and hers grew bolder each day. Late at night, she would lie awake, imagining a life where she and Arjun were together, daring herself to dream the impossible. The tension built quietly at first, almost imperceptibly. But one evening during a family dinner, things changed. Arjun, always polite and reserved around Meera, lingered a little longer than usual after the meal, asking about her work, her ambitions, her future. There was a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes, something that made Meera's heart race and her mind swirl with questions she wasn't ready to answer. That night, she went home feeling both thrilled and terrified, caught in a storm of guilt, desire, and confusion. Meera's friends noticed the change in her. She was distracted, secretive, and unusually quiet at times, though she still laughed and smiled when people were around. No one could guess the turmoil she was experiencing inside. She knew what she was doing was dangerous, even morally wrong, but there was a pull she couldn't resist. She told herself she was strong, that she could control her feelings, but control is always the first thing to slip away when temptation knocks at the door with a familiar face. Weeks later, a family trip became the turning point. Meera and Arjun were seated next to each other during the journey, with hours to talk, laugh, and share stories. What started as innocent conversation slowly transformed into something neither of them could ignore. There was an electric tension in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that what they were feeling was forbidden, yet intoxicating. Meera felt her heart pound in ways it never had before, knowing each glance, each word, each accidental touch was crossing a line she had sworn never to approach. When they returned from the trip, things escalated faster than Meera had imagined. What began as fleeting encounters and stolen moments grew into secret meetings, late-night calls, and messages that made her pulse race every time her phone buzzed. She knew it was wrong, that she was betraying the trust of her aunt who had always treated her like a daughter, but the thrill was too powerful to resist. The rational part of her mind screamed to stop, but her heart and desire had already made a choice she couldn't undo. The whispers around the family began subtly. People noticed Meera and Arjun's closeness, the way they laughed a little too freely in each other's presence, the way their eyes met with unspoken secrets. Rumors started to ripple through their circle, though nothing could be confirmed yet. Meera felt a strange combination of fear and excitement. The thrill of breaking rules paired with the constant worry that everything would collapse if anyone discovered the truth. Finally, the day came when Meera made a decision that would change her life forever. A choice she thought she could live with, a choice she thought she wanted, a choice that would bind her to a path of no return. She married Arjun. It was a ceremony small in attendance but monumental in consequence. Friends and family were shocked, confused, and in some cases quietly judgmental. Suman, her aunt, was devastated, her eyes filled with betrayal and pain that no one could ignore. Meera had wanted love, adventure, and a sense of control over her destiny, But she had stepped into a world of complicated emotions, broken loyalties, and consequences she hadn't yet imagined. In the first few days of married life, Meera told herself that she had made the right choice. She tried to focus on the excitement of a new chapter, the warmth of companionship, and the happiness she had imagined. But happiness is often fragile, especially when built on secrets and betrayals. The reality of her decision soon crept in like a shadow she couldn't shake, and she began noticing cracks she had never anticipated, the subtle judgments, the awkward silences, the coldness that sometimes replaced smiles. The life she thought she had dreamed of started to feel like a cage, one built from choices she now questioned deeply. And just when she began to realize that her new life might not be what she imagined, something happened. Something unexpected, something that would make her question everything she thought she knew about love, family, and loyalty. It was a moment so shocking that it threatened to unravel everything she had worked so hard to keep hidden. A secret, long buried and unknown, suddenly surfaced, putting her entire world at risk. Meera's heart raced, her mind spun, and she felt the first true pangs of regret. As she stood there, caught between desire, guilt, and fear, Meera realized that life doesn't give second chances so easily. The man she had married, the life she had chosen, and the family she had betrayed, all of it was now teetering on the edge of disaster. And in that instant, she knew she had to confront the consequences of her actions, even if it meant facing heartbreak, anger, and betrayal in ways she never imagined. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it's only beginning. The choices Meera made, the secrets she uncovered, and the consequences that followed would test her in ways she couldn't yet understand. How will she cope with the reality of marrying her aunt's husband? Can love survive guilt and betrayal? And what shocking revelation will turn her carefully constructed world upside down next? The answers lie ahead, but one thing is certain. Meera's journey is far from over. The happiness she chased may not be what she finds, and the regrets she will face may change her forever. And just when she thought she could control her destiny, life had other plans. Plans that would make her question everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and family. Meera sat in her room that night, the faint hum of the ceiling fan above doing nothing to calm her racing thoughts. The house felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet, as if it was holding its breath for something she wasn't ready to face. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of the choice she had made, of the life she had stepped into, and of the family she had hurt. She stared at the wedding photos still scattered across the dresser, the smiles frozen on paper looking hollow now. The man in those pictures, the man she had promised to spend her life with, looked the same, yet everything about him felt different. It wasn't that Arjun had changed. If anything, he seemed the same charming, confident man she had fallen for. But the air between them carried weight, the kind of heavy silence that comes with unspoken truths. Meera could feel it in his eyes, the tension when they passed a mirror together, the brief flicker of worry he tried to hide with a smile. She wondered if he was beginning to regret their decision too, or if he had already known the consequences better than she had. Her mind drifted back to how everything started, back to the small signs she had ignored. The way Arjun always lingered a little too long when her aunt wasn't around, the way he laughed at her jokes in a way that made her pulse quicken, the subtle glances that seemed innocent at the time but now felt like warnings. Meera remembered thinking she could control it, that she could just enjoy the thrill without letting it grow into something dangerous. But desire, she realized too late, doesn't listen to logic. Her aunt, Suman, was the first person who had unknowingly set the stage for everything. Suman had been warm, welcoming, and generous, always including Meera in family matters, seeking her opinion and treating her more like a daughter than a niece. Meera had always admired her aunt, envied her even. Her grace, her intelligence, the way people seemed to naturally respect her. But admiration can twist into something else when combined with loneliness and longing, and Meera had crossed that line before she even realized it. She thought about the first time she truly felt the pull toward Arjun. It was during a family gathering last winter, the kind that lasted late into the night with music, laughter, and endless chatter. While everyone was busy in conversations, Meera had found herself sitting next to Arjun on the couch. They had started talking about books, about movies, about dreams they never voiced to others. The conversation felt different, as if the world outside that room didn't exist. She remembered the warmth in his voice, the comfort of his presence, and the thrill of knowing it was something forbidden. That night, she had gone home with her heart pounding, telling herself it was nothing, a simple mistake of emotion. But mistakes have a way of repeating themselves, and Meera had learned that the hard way. Over the next months, the stolen moments grew bolder. A touch on the hand here, a shared glance there, words spoken in hushed tones when the house was empty. Each encounter was electric, dangerous, and intoxicating. She had started avoiding her aunt's presence, finding excuses to step out, pretending to be busy, all while the tension between her and Arjun grew silently but steadily. The family trips, the celebrations, the casual dinners, they all became stages for temptation. Meera had to constantly remind herself to stay composed, to wear her mask of respectability. But private moments told a different story. Late at night, when the house was asleep, Arjun would call, his voice low and full of unspoken meaning. They would talk for hours about dreams, regrets, and possibilities, never addressing the guilt that hung over them like a storm cloud. Sometimes Meera would hang up, tears streaming down her face, hating herself for feeling the way she did, yet unable to resist the connection she had with him. Then there was the turning point, the day she decided she could no longer live with just fleeting moments. Meera had convinced herself she wanted a life with Arjun, that she could face the consequences, that the guilt was worth the love she believed they shared. She hadn't counted on the aftermath, the ripple effect that would reach into every corner of her family's life. The moment she said yes to him, the world she had known shifted. The house felt heavier, the smiles forced, the laughter strained. Her aunt's disappointment was tangible, but her silence was louder than words. Suman didn't yell, didn't cry openly. She just withdrew, her gaze cutting like a blade every time it landed on Meera. Meera's friends tried to support her, but even they seemed uncertain how to react. Some whispered warnings, others offered hollow congratulations, but all of them looked at her differently. The way people treat you after a scandal, small or large, is something that never fully disappears. Meera could feel it every time she walked through the neighborhood, every time family friends came to visit. There were glances she couldn't ignore, conversations that abruptly stopped when she entered the room, and the subtle tension in voices that once spoke freely with warmth. Arjun, for his part, seemed increasingly distant in ways that frightened her. He still smiled, still joked, still held her hand when others weren't looking, but there were moments when she caught him staring out of the window for long minutes, lost in thought. Meera began to wonder what he was thinking, whether he was struggling with his own guilt, or if he was hiding something from her entirely. The uncertainty gnawed at her, the suspense making her restless. She had wanted love and excitement, but she had never imagined how complicated it could become. One afternoon, as Meera was cleaning the living room, she noticed an envelope on the coffee table that hadn't been there before. It was addressed to her in handwriting she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, turning it over in her hands. Something about the way it looked, plain, official, and urgent, made her instinctively cautious. She knew that whatever was inside could change everything, could reveal secrets she wasn't ready to face, could finally make the tension she had been feeling unbearable. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. The letter contained information that made her stomach twist. It spoke of truths about Arjun's past that even she didn't know, hints of decisions he had made before they married, and consequences that could reach far beyond their small circle. There were questions in her mind she couldn't answer yet. Did he hide this from her? Was there something she should have known? And most importantly, how would this revelation affect the fragile threads holding their new life together? That night, Meera couldn't sleep. The quiet of the house was broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden floor and the soft rustle of leaves outside. She thought about her aunt, about the trust that had been broken, about the life she had tried to shape and how quickly it had begun to unravel. Fear, guilt, curiosity, and anticipation swirled together in her mind, leaving her dizzy and exhausted. The regret she had been feeling earlier now deepened, fueled by the mystery she had just uncovered. Meera knew that confronting Arjun directly could change everything. It could bring answers or it could destroy them both. She realized that love, when built on secrecy, comes with a cost far heavier than she had imagined. And as the night wore on, with shadows dancing across the walls of her room, she understood that the choices she made next could define her entire future. There was no turning back, only moving forward into uncertainty, toward truths that might be more dangerous than she could handle. The storm was approaching, though she couldn't see it yet. The secrets, the betrayals, the hidden truths, all of them were closing in. Meera felt it deep in her bones. Life was about to test her in ways she hadn't imagined, and once the veil was lifted, there would be no going back to the innocence she had once known. She was trapped between desire and guilt, love and regret, and the mystery of Arjun's past threatened to engulf everything she had ever thought she wanted. And just when she thought she could catch her breath, the door creaked open and a shadow fell across the room. Meera froze, her heart hammering as a voice she hadn't expected whispered her name. It was soft, familiar, yet heavy with tension, carrying a warning that made her blood run cold. Something, or someone, had stepped into the story she thought she controlled, and in that moment she realized that the real consequences were only beginning. The next morning, Meera woke up with the weight of the letter pressing on her chest. She tried to push it out of her mind, but the questions refused to leave. What did Arjun really want? Why had he kept this part of his past hidden? And most importantly, what did it mean for the life they were building together? She tried to distract herself with chores, with work, with anything that would keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning, but every noise in the house seemed louder than usual, every shadow a reminder of the tension that had crept in overnight. Arjun, meanwhile, seemed calm, almost unnervingly so. He moved around the house with his usual ease, smiling at Meera in a way that suggested nothing was wrong. But she noticed the little things, the way he hesitated before answering a question, the quick glance at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking, the quiet sigh when he thought the house was empty. There was a layer of secrecy now between them, invisible yet heavy, and Meera realized that she was no longer the only one carrying secrets. Her thoughts kept returning to her aunt, Suman. She had tried to reach out, to apologize, to explain herself, but Suman's coldness was impenetrable. Every attempt Meera made to speak felt like hitting a wall. Suman would nod politely, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions: disappointment, hurt, perhaps even anger. Meera wondered if her aunt even realized how much Meera was struggling. Or maybe Suman already knew everything. The thought was almost worse than the uncertainty about Arjun. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had started to buzz with subtle whispers. Family friends would make passing comments, casual but pointed, about loyalty, about choices, about trust. Meera could feel their eyes on her, as if judging her for stepping into a life that had been off limits. Even some distant relatives, who she barely interacted with, seemed to know about her marriage before she had even mentioned it. The gossip stung more than she expected, and it reminded her constantly of the precarious position she was in. She had wanted excitement, passion, and love, but she hadn't counted on the social consequences, the scrutiny that followed every move. Work became her only refuge, but even there, Meera couldn't escape the tension. Her colleagues noticed the shift in her demeanor, the way she sometimes seemed lost in thought or distracted by her phone, or nervous when someone casually mentioned family matters. She knew she couldn't explain the real reason for her anxiety, and that only made it worse. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between the life she had chosen and the guilt that threatened to consume her. And then there was the mysterious letter. Meera found herself reading it over and over, trying to decipher what it really meant. Certain lines suggested that Arjun had made mistakes in the past, decisions that could have long-term consequences. There were references to business dealings, to promises kept and broken, to relationships that had ended badly. But some parts were vague, hinting at things Meera didn't understand. It was enough to unsettle her completely, to make her question not only Arjun's past but also the trust she had placed in him. At the same time, another layer of tension emerged from Arjun's perspective. He had noticed Meera's growing unease, her restless nights, and her hesitation when he tried to reach out. He wanted to tell her everything, to confess what he had been hiding, but he was caught between protecting her and protecting himself. Some truths, he realized, could destroy the fragile bond they had built overnight. The more he hesitated, the heavier the silence became, until it started to feel like a wall between them that neither could scale. Meanwhile, Suman's life quietly began to shift as well. She had always been composed, but behind closed doors, her grief was real. Friends who came to check on her noticed her quiet withdrawal, the way she spent hours alone, sometimes just staring out of the window. She didn't speak of Meera or Arjun, but the pain was palpable. And yet, in that silence, a plan began to form. Suman wasn't the kind of person to accept betrayal passively. She was thinking, calculating, waiting for the right moment to confront the situation, to reclaim what she had lost. The tension between her and Meera was no longer just emotional, it was becoming strategic, a quiet but dangerous game. Amid all of this, Meera found herself drawn to another subplot she hadn't anticipated, her own family's perspective. Her parents were supportive but worried, constantly giving advice that felt both helpful and suffocating. They spoke in gentle tones about responsibility, morality, and consequences, but Meera often found herself tuning them out, caught between listening and protecting her own fragile sense of justification. Every conversation was a reminder that her choice wasn't just hers alone, it affected everyone around her. Even Arjun's friends started to notice subtle changes. Some were suspicious, others indifferent, but all seemed to sense the tension in his home life. The closer they were to him, the more carefully they chose their words, aware that even a passing comment could trigger a storm. Meera realized that the ripple effects of her decision extended far beyond her household. Secrets, betrayals, and lies had begun to entangle everyone around them, creating a web that was difficult to navigate and even harder to escape. As days turned into weeks, Meera found herself questioning everything she had believed about love and happiness. The excitement she had felt at marrying Arjun was fading, replaced by fear, regret, and uncertainty. Every smile felt fragile, every touch heavy with unspoken tension. Even small disagreements, once inconsequential, now carried the weight of years of betrayal and mistrust. And in the quiet moments when she was alone, Meera felt the crushing reality of her choice, the knowledge that some doors once opened could never be closed again. The suspense of the letter, the secrecy in Arjun's behavior, and the unresolved tension with her aunt combined to create an almost unbearable pressure. Meera began to notice subtle patterns, how Arjun avoided certain topics, how Suman seemed to watch her from a distance, how neighbors' whispers never truly stopped. The world felt smaller and more constricting, as if every action was under scrutiny and every secret at risk of exposure. The very excitement that had drawn her to Arjun now threatened to suffocate her. And then there was the unexpected angle Meera hadn't considered: jealousy and rivalry within the extended family. Some cousins and relatives who had once been neutral now seemed to take sides, subtly influencing conversations and spreading hints that added layers to the tension. Meera began to feel surrounded, not by support or love, but by whispers, hidden agendas, and questions that no one would answer directly. Every dinner, every visit, every casual encounter carried the potential to ignite a new conflict. Even within the home, the atmosphere had changed. Arjun's presence, once comforting, now felt like a quiet reminder of everything forbidden. The house, once warm and full of laughter, seemed shadowed with secrets and unspoken fears. Meera often found herself pacing, replaying conversations in her head, trying to anticipate what might happen next. And she realized, with a sinking feeling, that she could no longer ignore the consequences of her actions. One evening, as Meera prepared dinner, she noticed Arjun staring at her in silence from the doorway. There was an intensity in his gaze, a mix of concern and something else she couldn't name. She wanted to ask him what he was thinking, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat. The letter, Suman's coldness, the neighborhood whispers, and her own guilt, all of it combined into a storm she wasn't ready to face. And yet, in that silence, she knew the tension was building toward a breaking point. Everything in Meera's life seemed suspended, as if waiting for an inevitable collision. The secrets, the betrayals, the unspoken emotions, and the growing fear of exposure had created a pressure cooker. And in the midst of it all, Meera realized that the story she had thought she was writing for herself was no longer under her control. The consequences were coming, but exactly how and from which direction remained a mystery. And so, the days continued, each one heavier than the last. Meera navigated a world where desire, regret, loyalty, and betrayal intertwined, where every interaction had weight, and where the past and present collided in ways she couldn't yet predict. The suspense didn't let up. It grew with each glance, each whispered word, and each secret uncovered. Life had become a delicate balancing act, one misstep away from exposing everything she had tried to hide. Meera knew that eventually the truth would have to come out. She didn't know when or how or what the fallout would be. But one thing was certain: nothing could remain hidden forever. The tension between her, Arjun, Suman, and everyone around them was building toward a moment she feared and anticipated in equal measure. And in the quiet of the night, when the house slept and only the shadows moved, Meera understood that her story had only just begun, and the real conflicts, emotional, social, and moral, were waiting to engulf her completely. Meera couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to collapse. The air in the house had grown heavier over the past few days, each conversation layered with tension, each glance loaded with suspicion. Even the smallest sound, the creak of the floorboards, the faint tick of the wall clock, felt like a warning, a signal that something she wasn't ready for was creeping closer. She tried to focus on her routine, but every task felt hollow, meaningless compared to the storm building around her. Arjun had become more distant, not in a cold or angry way, but in a way that made Meera question everything she thought she knew. He smiled sometimes, tried to keep conversations light, but the effort felt strained. There were long pauses when she asked him simple questions, a flicker of unease in his eyes that he couldn't completely hide. The files she had discovered, the letters, the photographs, they all pointed to a past he hadn't shared, a side of him that seemed tangled with secrets that could hurt everyone she loved. Her thoughts kept returning to her aunt, Suman. The woman had always been composed, but Meera could see the strain behind her calm exterior. Her aunt's silences were no longer just quiet moments. They were sharp, pointed reminders that Meera had crossed boundaries, that she had disrupted a balance she hadn't fully understood. Meera wanted to apologize, to explain, to rebuild the trust that had been broken, but every attempt seemed to hit a wall. Suman would nod politely, but her eyes told a story of anger, disappointment, and perhaps something even deeper, betrayal that went beyond words. One evening, as Meera sat in the study, she received a message from an unknown number. "It's time to see the truth. Come alone." Her heart raced as she read it. The handwriting, the timing, the tone, it was deliberate, urgent, and impossible to ignore. She stared at the screen for a long moment, weighing the risks. Every instinct told her to stay, to avoid whatever confrontation awaited, but curiosity and the need for answers overpowered fear. She knew that the answers she sought were on the other side of that choice. As she walked through the quiet streets toward the park where the message had instructed her to go, shadows seemed to move just out of sight. The streetlights flickered, casting shifting patterns on the pavement. Meera's pulse quickened with each step. The night was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves, yet every sound seemed amplified, every shadow threatening. She clutched her purse tightly, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this someone connected to Arjun's past? Was it a friend? Or was it someone trying to manipulate her, to pull her into a confrontation she might not be ready for? At the park, the air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves. Meera paused, scanning the area. There was someone waiting, a tall figure emerging from the shadows, face obscured, voice calm yet charged with urgency. It was the woman from the letters, the one who had delivered the first clues to Arjun's secrets. The sight of her made Meera's stomach twist. This encounter wasn't casual. It was deliberate. Something critical was about to be revealed. "You need to see this," the woman said, handing Meera a folder thick with documents. "Everything you think you know about Arjun, about your family, it's all connected. And you're closer to danger than you realize." Meera's hands shook as she took the folder, flipping through the papers. Each page revealed more hidden truths, business dealings, financial disputes, overlapping connections with family members. The threads wove a picture far more complicated than she had imagined. She realized that the tension she had been feeling for months was only the surface. Beneath it was a web of secrets that threatened to unravel everything. Just then her phone buzzed again. Another message, short and cryptic. "He's hiding more. Watch carefully. Trust no one fully." Meera's heart skipped a beat. The message confirmed what she had begun to fear. Arjun's past was not just complicated, it was dangerous. Every instinct she had ignored, every doubt she had pushed aside, was suddenly screaming at her. She was standing on the edge of a revelation that could change everything. Back at home, Suman had been watching quietly. She knew something was happening, though Meera hadn't told her. The aunt's intuition had never failed her before. Suman's mind raced. What if Meera was about to face a truth that could hurt her even more? She wanted to intervene but knew that Meera had to discover this on her own. The tension between them, already high, was now thick enough to touch. Meanwhile, Arjun felt the walls closing in. He had tried to control his past, to protect Meera, but now the secrets were surfacing in a way he couldn't stop. Every move Meera made, every message she received, every glance of suspicion she cast his way tightened the knot in his chest. He realized that the consequences of his past choices were catching up, threatening not just his reputation, but the fragile trust he had with Meera and the balance of the family he had stepped into. As Meera reached the old bridge, the place she had been instructed to meet, the night seemed to close in around her. The river below reflected the moonlight, and the wind tugged at her hair, cold and relentless. She saw a shadow moving closer and her pulse raced. Every step felt like a countdown, every moment thick with anticipation. The folder in her hands weighed heavier with each step, the secrets inside pressing on her like a physical force. The figure ahead stepped into the light, a woman Meera recognized from photographs, a crucial player in the story she had been uncovering. Her eyes were sharp, her presence commanding. "You're finally here," she said. "Everything you've feared, everything you've tried to ignore, is about to collide. Be ready for what comes next." Meera's breath caught. The suspense she had carried for months, the fear of betrayal, the uncertainty about Arjun, the tension with her aunt, all converged in this moment. She knew that once the next truth was revealed, nothing would be the same. The questions she had been asking, the doubts she had been suppressing, the tension she had been living with, they were all about to explode. As the woman handed over a second envelope, this one heavier, thicker, Meera realized she was standing at the edge of everything. The secrets, the lies, the betrayals, the past connections, all of it was about to be exposed. She felt a mix of fear, anger, curiosity, and dread. The suspense was unbearable. Every instinct screamed that this revelation would change everything. Her marriage, her family, her trust, and even her own sense of self. The night seemed to hold its breath. Even the river below, usually gurgling gently, was eerily silent. Meera's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, and the tension built until it felt like it might crack her chest. Every secret she had uncovered, every betrayal she had endured, had led to this moment. And in the distance she sensed another presence. Someone waiting, watching, ready to intervene at the perfect moment. This was it. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Every conflict, the marriage to her aunt's husband, the secrets of Arjun's past, the tension with Suman, the mystery of the unknown woman, was about to collide. The suspense that had gripped her life, her heart, and her family was reaching its peak. The audience, following her story, would be on the edge of their seats, waiting for the moment of revelation, knowing that the next moment could change everything forever. Meera took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that when she unfolded the contents of the envelope, the climax of her story would begin. Every choice, every regret, every secret she had tried to ignore would demand attention. The night was thick with suspense, with tension, with unspoken truths, and the moment of reckoning was finally at hand. She looked up, heart pounding, knowing that the next revelation would determine everything. Trust, love, and the fragile bonds of family would be tested like never before. Every shadow around her seemed alive, every sound amplified, and the chill in the air felt like a warning. The story had built to this point and there was no turning back. In that silent, tense moment on the old bridge, Meera understood that the climax, the confrontation, the revelations, the choices, was imminent. The suspense had reached its peak, and the world she had been living in, full of secrets, betrayal, and tension, was about to explode into truth. Meera thought she had seen the worst of the storm, that the tension between her, Arjun, and her aunt had reached its peak. But life has a way of proving that just when you think things can't get more complicated, they always do. It started with a call in the middle of the night, one that made her heart stop and her hands tremble. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet there was something she couldn't place. An urgency, a warning, a hint of danger that made her stomach twist. "Meera, you need to know the truth," the voice whispered. "About Arjun, and about everything you think you understand." Her mind raced, 1,000 possibilities flashing at once. Was it a friend? A relative? Or someone who knew more than they should? She felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the first time she realized that the world outside her house was already aware of her secrets, and someone was watching closely. She hung up, hands shaking, heart pounding. The silence afterward felt heavier than ever. Something was coming, something bigger than gossip or family tension. The next morning, Meera confronted Arjun casually, trying to mask her fear. "Arjun, is there something you're hiding from me?" she asked, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying her anxiety. Arjun paused, his expression unreadable. "Meera, there are things about my past I haven't told you," he admitted finally, though the words came slowly, carefully. "Things I thought I could explain later, things I thought wouldn't matter." Her heart sank. The letter had hinted at secrets, but now, hearing him say it aloud, the weight became real. She wanted to press him for answers, to demand the truth, but she could feel the tension in the room tighten like a noose. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of fear or guilt, that made her realize this was bigger than anything she had imagined. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "Check the old files in the study. You'll understand." Meera froze. Old files? Study? What could this mean? Curiosity battled with fear, but she couldn't ignore it. Something told her this wasn't just another threat. It was a key to understanding Arjun, her marriage, and perhaps even her aunt's cold behavior. She entered the study cautiously, her fingers trembling as she sifted through papers, old photographs, and files stacked neatly on the shelves. Then she found it, a folder labeled in Arjun's handwriting, neatly tucked in the back, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Her hands shook as she opened it, and what she found made her gasp. There were documents, messages, and photographs revealing a part of Arjun's life she had never imagined. Financial dealings she hadn't known about, old business associates with questionable reputations, and letters from someone else, a woman whose presence suggested Arjun had connections far deeper than Meera realized. The shock wasn't just in the discovery, it was in realizing how carefully he had hidden it. And as she looked closer, she noticed dates, names, and meetings that overlapped suspiciously with the time he had spent with her aunt before their marriage. Questions swirled in her mind. Was this why Suman had been distant, cold, or angry? Was Arjun manipulating more than just her? And who was this mysterious woman, suddenly a player in a story Meera thought she understood? As she sat there trying to process the files, Suman appeared behind her silently. Her presence was sudden, almost ghost-like, and Meera jumped. "You found it," Suman said softly, almost too calmly. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, full of emotion that Meera couldn't read. Fear, anger, and something else, suspicion, maybe even revenge, mingled in her gaze. "What? How long have you known?" Meera stammered, clutching the folder. "Long enough," Suman replied, her voice low but steady. "You think you've unraveled the whole story, but this is only the beginning." Meera felt the room spin. She had known there was tension, secrets, and betrayal, but now there was a hidden layer she hadn't anticipated. The stakes were no longer just about her feelings or guilt. They were about family, trust, and consequences she might not be ready to face. Every step she took from here could lead to disaster, and she realized she was not the only one at risk. Arjun entered quietly, his expression unreadable. "Meera?" "Suman. I was hoping we could handle this privately," he said. But Meera could see the tension in his shoulders, the nervous twitch in his hand. He wasn't lying. There were truths he had kept buried, and now, for better or worse, they were surfacing. The three of them stood in the study, the folder between them like a fragile bridge over a pit of secrets. Meera's mind was racing. Every revelation from the files, every hushed word, every lingering glance from Arjun and Suman added layers to the suspense she hadn't thought possible. She realized that love, desire, and betrayal were entangled with far more complicated histories than she had imagined. And she understood in that moment that she had stumbled into a story much larger than her own emotions. A story of past mistakes, hidden relationships, and consequences that might affect everyone involved. Even as she tried to focus, her thoughts kept returning to the woman in the letters. Who was she? How did she fit into Arjun's past? And was she a threat to the fragile world Meera had tried to create for herself? The uncertainty gnawed at her, leaving her restless and anxious. Every instinct told her to dig deeper, to uncover the full truth, but fear warned her that some discoveries could be too dangerous, too irreversible. And yet, the suspense didn't end there. That evening, as Meera tried to sleep, she received another message from the same unknown number. "Meet me at the park near the old bridge. Alone. You need to see this in person." Her heart raced. Could she trust this? Could it be another warning or a trap? The message promised answers but also danger, a perfect storm of curiosity and fear. Meera knew one thing for certain. She couldn't go on pretending everything was normal. The secrets, the betrayal, the hidden truths, each one had been building toward this point. And now, with a mysterious woman in the picture, Suman's silent planning, and Arjun's hidden past, the stakes were higher than ever. Her marriage, her trust, her family, even her own sense of self, all were dangling on a thread, and one wrong move could unravel everything she had tried to hold together. As she stared out the window, the night dark and quiet around her, Meera realized that life had become a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and unexpected twists. Every choice, every conversation, every glance could shift the balance, bringing revelation or ruin. And somewhere out there, the person behind the messages was waiting, ready to pull the next thread and reveal a truth Meera wasn't sure she could handle. In that moment, the thrill of love, the sting of regret, and the fear of betrayal converged into a single terrifying realization. Her story was far from over. If anything, the real drama was just beginning. And as the wind whispered through the trees outside, she understood that she was no longer just a player in her own life. She was caught in a game much bigger than herself, a story of secrets, lies, and consequences that might change everything forever. This section raises the stakes by introducing a new mysterious figure, a hidden layer to Arjun's past, and Suman's active awareness, all while keeping the suspense high. The night was thick with tension as Meera made her way to the old bridge, her heart hammering in her chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, her mind racing with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. The park was quiet, almost eerily still, except for the soft rustle of leaves in the winter breeze. She clutched her phone, the mysterious messages still glowing on the screen, and took a deep breath. This was the moment where everything, her marriage, her trust, her family, and her own future, would either be clarified or destroyed. When she arrived, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through her. For a moment, Meera froze, unsure whether to run or demand answers. But the woman didn't move aggressively. Instead, she held out a folder. Another one, this time marked with dates and details even more personal than the files in the study. "You've been digging," the woman said softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "But you don't know the whole story yet." Meera's mind raced. This was the woman from the letters. She realized now that she wasn't a threat in the traditional sense. She was part of Arjun's past, someone who had insight into secrets that even Meera hadn't imagined. Hesitantly, she took the folder, her fingers trembling. As she flipped through the papers, photographs, and documents, a shocking picture emerged. Arjun had been involved in a business partnership years ago that went wrong, leading to someone else's loss, and this woman had been a close witness to it. But the twist wasn't the past itself, it was how it intersected with Meera's family. Some of the financial mistakes had inadvertently affected Suman's relatives. That explained her aunt's coldness, the subtle tension, the quiet planning Meera had sensed all along. Suman wasn't just hurt by Meera's choice, she had been protecting her family from a ripple effect that no one else had seen coming. Arjun arrived moments later, looking exhausted and tense. "Meera? I didn't mean for this to come out like this," he said, his voice low and full of regret. "I tried to leave the past buried, thinking it wouldn't matter, but it seems everything is connected in ways I didn't predict." Meera felt the weight of truth settling over her. She looked at him, at the woman from the letters, and then thought of Suman. Everything was tangled: love, betrayal, guilt, and now responsibility. Her emotions surged, anger at Arjun for hiding this, sorrow for the consequences that had already rippled through her family, and fear of what would happen next. Suman appeared quietly behind Arjun, her presence commanding. "You two need to understand something," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "What happened in the past isn't just about Arjun. It's about accountability. About how choices, hidden or otherwise, affect everyone around you. Meera, I was angry with you because I saw how easy it is to get lost in desire and ignore consequences. But this," she gestured toward the documents, "this is bigger than any one of us." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Meera felt her chest tighten as all the tension she had carried, the guilt, the fear, the secrecy, came crashing down in one overwhelming wave. But amid the pressure, a strange clarity emerged. She understood now that life wasn't about hiding from mistakes. It was about facing them, taking responsibility, and trying to make things right. Arjun stepped forward, taking Meera's hand. "I should have told you everything from the start," he admitted. "I wanted love, I wanted happiness, but I didn't realize how the past could follow me into the present. I'm sorry, Meera. I'm sorry for the lies, the secrets, and everything you've had to endure because of me." Meera looked at him, her anger and fear slowly giving way to understanding. "I made mistakes too," she said softly. "I let my heart decide without seeing the full picture. But I can't undo the past. I can only move forward." Suman stepped closer, her expression softening. "Then move forward together, but carefully. Trust has to be rebuilt. Secrets have to be addressed. And decisions need to be made with the bigger picture in mind." As the three of them stood there, the wind blowing softly around them, the sense of resolution began to settle in. The tension wasn't gone entirely, how could it be after everything? But for the first time, Meera felt that clarity, that understanding, that even in chaos there could be a path forward. Just as she began to breathe easier, the woman who had delivered the files spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling out a small envelope. Meera hesitated, her instinct screaming that this could be the final twist she hadn't seen coming. The woman handed it to her. "This will change everything you thought you knew about Arjun. About the choices that brought you here. Be careful." Meera's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, and not just any photo. It showed Arjun with someone she hadn't expected. Someone close to her own family, someone she had trusted. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. Part of the story she thought she had understood, part of the past she had tried to uncover, was far more personal than she ever imagined. Her heart pounded. Questions swirled. How deep did the secrets go? Was Arjun hiding more than she knew? Could trust survive this revelation? She looked at him, at Suman, at the mysterious woman, and realized that the story wasn't over. Though this was the climax, the turning point where the main conflicts had come to light, the consequences confronted. The stakes had just been raised higher than ever. And in that moment, standing on the old bridge with the wind cutting cold and sharp, Meera understood that life was messy, unpredictable, and full of twists she couldn't control. She had faced betrayal, regret, and secrecy, and survived. But one last shock, one last secret, remained, a twist that could change everything she thought she knew about love, family, and trust. The night felt endless, and Meera clutched the photograph, realizing that the final chapter was yet to be written. She had confronted the past, faced the conflicts, and even taken the first steps toward forgiveness. But the unexpected twist reminded her that in life, even when you think the storm has passed, the next wave can arrive when you least expect it. And this one could change everything. Meera stared at the photograph in her hands, her mind spinning. The image captured a moment frozen in time. Arjun smiling, but beside him was a familiar face she hadn't expected to see. Her cousin, someone she had grown up trusting, someone she had confided in countless times. Shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of betrayal washed over her all at once. She felt the world tilt beneath her feet, and for a moment she thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. Arjun's eyes met hers, calm but serious. "Meera, I wanted to tell you. I never meant to hurt anyone, especially not you or your family. I didn't know how to explain it, and I thought keeping it buried would protect everyone," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "But the truth always comes out." Suman stepped closer, placing a hand on Meera's shoulder. Her gaze was firm but not unkind. "Life is messy," she said quietly. "It isn't fair, and sometimes people we trust make mistakes that hurt us. But the key is what you do after. You can let betrayal define you, or you can find a way forward." Meera took a deep breath, finally letting herself look at everything honestly. She realized that the secrets, the betrayals, the tension, they had all brought her to this point, but they didn't have to define the rest of her life. Arjun had made mistakes, yes, but so had she. They had both allowed desire and curiosity to cloud judgment, but they also had the chance to rebuild trust if they were willing to face the past together. The woman from the letters who had followed her here stepped forward. "I'm not here to cause more trouble," she said. "I just wanted you to know the truth before it got worse. Arjun's past isn't perfect, and some of it intersects with your family in ways you needed to understand. But this is as far as I go. The rest is yours to decide." She handed Meera the last of the documents and turned to leave, fading into the darkness of the park like a shadow. Meera stayed behind for a moment, clutching the folder and the photograph, feeling the weight of the night. She thought about all the tension, the whispers, the fear, and the guilt that had plagued her since she had married Arjun. And she realized that while some things couldn't be undone, the future could still be written differently. She could choose honesty, transparency, and understanding. She could choose to rebuild even if it was difficult. The first step, she knew, was a conversation with Suman. That evening she returned home, the photograph and the folders safely tucked away. Suman was in the living room, sitting quietly by the window. Meera approached, feeling the tension between them like a tangible presence. "Aunt Suman," she began softly, I know I hurt you, and I don't want to hide anything anymore. I want to be honest about everything." Suman looked at her, her expression guarded but not harsh. "Honesty is a start," she said. "But trust takes time, Meera. You've broken it, yes, but it can be rebuilt if you're willing to put in the effort." Meera nodded. "I am. I promise." In the days that followed, she took small but meaningful steps. She sat down with Arjun, laying out the files, the letters, and the photograph, asking every question she had ever been too afraid to voice. And this time he answered fully and truthfully. He explained the mistakes from his past, the relationships that had been complicated, the decisions he had made, and the consequences he had tried to keep hidden. Every answer hurt, surprised, or shocked her, but it also gave her clarity. She could finally see the whole picture, and with it came a strange sense of relief. Meera also took time to reconcile with Suman. They spent hours talking, confronting the hurt and the betrayal, and gradually the coldness began to thaw. Suman explained her own perspective, how she had been hurt not just by the marriage, but by the hidden connections that threatened the family. She revealed fears that she had kept quiet, anger she had swallowed, and disappointment that had grown quietly over the months. Meera listened, apologized sincerely, and promised to be more mindful, to respect boundaries, and to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. The neighborhood gossip and the whispers that had once seemed suffocating slowly faded as Meera and Arjun worked on repairing their lives. They made choices to be more transparent, to limit misunderstandings, and to focus on building a life based on honesty rather than secrecy. Meera learned the delicate balance of navigating relationships, understanding that forgiveness and patience were as important as desire and passion. Even the mysterious woman became a symbol of closure. Though she never appeared again, the file she had left behind helped Meera understand the full scope of Arjun's past, allowing her to separate fear from fact. The tension that had haunted her nights began to ease, replaced by a sense of control and understanding she had not felt in months. Through all this, Meera reflected deeply on her journey. She had married her aunt's husband, yes, and she had lived through fear, guilt, and regret. But she also realized that life wasn't about avoiding mistakes. It was about facing them, learning, and moving forward. The regrets she had carried were not a punishment. They were lessons. The betrayals, the secrets, and the surprises had forced her to confront her own choices, her own desires, and the consequences that came with them. Arjun too changed through this process. The weight of secrecy lifted as he committed to transparency, honesty, and rebuilding trust not just with Meera, but with the family he had inadvertently hurt. He and Meera worked together to repair relationships, navigate lingering tensions, and plan for a future that was built on understanding rather than passion alone. Suman, having confronted both her grief and her anger, found a new kind of respect for Meera. She saw the growth, the willingness to accept responsibility, and the courage it took to face the past head-on. Slowly, the aunt and niece relationship began to heal, more honest and resilient than before. The past could not be erased, but it could become a foundation for wiser choices and stronger bonds. And yet, even as life began to settle, Meera couldn't forget the photograph, the final twist that had revealed a deeper connection between Arjun and her family. But instead of fear or resentment, she chose reflection. She realized that life's surprises, even painful ones, were opportunities to understand people more fully, to see the consequences of choices, and to strengthen relationships rather than let secrets destroy them. In the end, Meera and Arjun found a fragile but lasting peace. They learned that love alone is never enough. It must be paired with honesty, accountability, and respect. Meera understood that marrying her aunt's husband had been a complicated choice, full of consequences, but it had also given her clarity about herself, her family, and what truly matters in relationships. Regret became a teacher rather than a burden, guiding her toward wiser, more thoughtful choices. The final days of the story found Meera sitting quietly in her home, the photograph now framed carefully on a shelf. It served as a reminder, not of betrayal or secrets, but of the lessons she had learned and the growth she had achieved. She had faced desire, temptation, fear, and guilt, and emerged stronger, more aware, and more compassionate. The tension and suspense that had once defined her life had transformed into understanding and resolution. Looking back, Meera knew that life would always be unpredictable, full of unexpected twists and challenges. But she also knew that facing the truth, confronting mistakes, and taking responsibility were the keys to moving forward. Love, regret, secrets, and family, all the elements that had once felt like chaos, had shaped her into someone capable of handling life's complexities. And as she glanced at Arjun, sitting across the room with a quiet smile, and Suman, who was now finally at peace with her, Meera felt a sense of closure she had never thought possible. The story that had begun with temptation and regret had ended with honesty, understanding, and the hard-earned wisdom that life's challenges are never truly meaningless. They are lessons waiting to be learned. Meera closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and realized that while the journey had been painful, she had found something far more valuable than excitement or desire: clarity, resilience, and the courage to face the unexpected. The chapters of secrecy, betrayal, and suspense were behind her now, leaving space for a future defined not by mistakes, but by choices, honesty, and growth. In the quiet of the night, with the house finally calm, Meera whispered to herself, "I survived. I learned. And I'm ready for what comes next."